Hello, it's Charlene Lee here, and I'm happy to be talking about one of my favorite topics, which is to play big. And the reason why I love this is that when I talk to disruptors in my research and in my work, I'm always so impressed by sort of the scope of how they're thinking about things. The things that they want to achieve are so big, so audacious. And I've always wondered, how did you come up with this idea? How did you have the audacity to think that this is something that you could even come close to achieving? And that applies to both the entrepreneurs who are starting businesses with the ambition to change the world, but also leaders at very large organizations where the prospect of turning this aircraft carrier somewhere degrees into a completely different direction just seems like an insurmountable task. So what gets it into people's ideas that they could actually accomplish these amazingly big things? And so that's where I started doing some research to understand, where does that impetus come from? What is it that we can learn as mere mortals in this world about how do we actually play big? And I want to draw a distinction between dreaming big and playing big. It's one thing to dream, it's another thing to actually do it. So today we're going to be talking about how to play big. So just to contrast, what is not playing big mean is playing small. And I think this is in many ways what we do on a day-to-day basis, because we've been told all of our lives that we need to be thinking about playing small, playing it safe. And that's a smart thing to do, because if you think about it, we don't really want to promise more than we can deliver. And we want to make sure that when we're saying something that we want to do, that we're going to come through that, because our word is our bond. So how do we do this? And as the good child of immigrant parents, this was especially important. Go to school, behave, do well, get A's in school, go to graduate school, become a doctor. And so it wasn't that my parents never said, don't play big. The emphasis had always been on staying within the box of what society has defined for us to be successful. And so why play big? Why even go against this and try to do something completely different? Well, I think it is really about disruption, frankly. And disruption isn't just about blowing things up or about technology. My definition of disruption is that it drives exponential growth, exponential change and impact. It results in something. And you have to do that by playing big. The research also shows that in a given industry, that the vast majority of the people in the industry will do about average. But it's a 20% who do extraordinarily well. And it's because they play big. They make big moves, like acquiring companies, investing in new businesses, shifting their business from where it is today into a completely new market, attracting new customers with new value propositions. They're playing big, they're taking risks, and they're making and taking the steps necessary to do that. So I want to give you two quick examples. One of my favorite ones is from T-Mobile. So what they did is they were the fourth largest player in the United States in terms of mobile. And they wanted to make sure that they were trying to grow bigger. But how do you do that when you're a distant fourth player? And so they looked at various ways to position themselves and then came up with something called the Un-carrier. And the whole idea was to bash everybody else in the industry by not being like every other mobile carrier, but to do things completely different. And one of their signature moves was to tear up the 2-year contract. And by doing that, people came flocking over, not the bottom feeders, but the best customers from places like AT&T, using the same mobile system. So it was super easy for them to draw those high value customers away from the number one player. Today, T-Mobile is the number 3 player, about to acquire Sprint, who is ahead of them. And because of their actions, they completely changed the way the mobile industry works in the United States, because no one has contracts anymore. So being a distant fourth player, causing all of this turmoil, allowed them to grow. That was playing big, because anybody in the right mind would have said, there's no way I could take on AT&T and Verizon, but T-Mobile did. So, and one other quick example from the nonprofit space. Southern New Hampshire University is a small 3,000 person campus, student campus in Southern New Hampshire. And when the president, Paul LeBlanc, came on board, he knows that there was a small group tucked away in the corner that did online learning. And he thought this would be a great thing to bring to their students because they're not necessarily traditional students coming out of high school. There are people doing mid-career changes, people coming back from the military, people who want to go back to school and get their degrees so they could advance in their careers. So they are now up to 100 and almost 150,000 students online getting degrees from an accredited university. Southern New Hampshire University didn't say, well, we're not one of the Ivy Leagues. We're not one of these for-profit institutions with lots of funding behind us. We're a nonprofit, small little campus. But why don't we think about playing big? And they're the number one provider of online degrees and really innovating into new areas like competency-based education. So again, who gives them the right to go off and do this? Who actually gave them permission? But what I think was so wonderful about people playing big is that you don't have to necessarily be in a position. You don't have to wait for somebody to give permission. So, well, I want to make sure that we have some time for questions and comments if I can see them. And I think what I would love to have comments, again, just put into the chat window and I'll do my best to address them, is what are some things that you are thinking of that you could play big with? And how would you actually go about doing that? What are your dreams? What are you thinking of? Or the other way to think about it is what's holding you back from thinking about these dreams? Hold on, let me just make sure I can't hear people. Okay, they muted over there. The multiple settings we have to do live streams. So what are the key things that you could potentially dream big about and play big? And also think about what are the things that are holding you back, because we'll talk about some strategies to help you to overcome those. So let me give you a couple steps about how to think big. First of all, think of a really big idea and make it a big stretch. I was speaking to somebody recently who's kicking off a fundraising campaign at a major university. And they're like, wow, we're really stretching this year. We're going to hit $2 billion over the next 5 years. We're going to raise a lot of money. We've got lots of plans. We're excited about it. And I think we're going to make it. I went, well, if you think you're going to make it, that's not much of a challenge, is it? Why don't you make it $3 billion? And he goes, well, we can't do that. Well, we might not get there. And I went, like, just imagine though, and just take a journey with me. Imagine 5 years from now, you've raised $3 billion. You actually did it. What did you do differently today in order to get that goal? And he got very excited. And he said, I know exactly what I would do. And it would be completely different than what we are today. But we can't do that because, and I'm like, look, well, why? Because you might not hit it. Because you may get close to your goal, but not quite there. And so I go back to maybe the goal here isn't to necessarily achieve the goal. That's not the objective. The objective is to play big, to go after those big, huge, hairy, audacious goals, those BHAGs, and imagine what that could look like. And then when you are creating that world, instead of thinking 5 years down the road, I will have accomplished this, actually write about it as if it was the present. Imagine yourself sitting there and achieving that goal. How awesome will it be? What will the world look like? And it's when you paint this picture of that present that you want to be in, that's when we're thinking and playing big. So one of the ways to ask yourself this is, if you had a fairy godmother and she showed up and offered you the best life that you could live, what would that life look like? What would be on your list? What were the things that if you could ask for anything but that magic wand, it would happen? What would it be? What would be on that list? And it's not to say it's achievable. And after the obvious things, like, okay, I want a house, I want a car, I want to be able to eat anything I want, see the people I want to see, really go back down and say, if I could serve and I could make a difference in the world with my organization, with myself, help my family, help my community and society, what would it be? That's playing big. And I want to make sure that we have that space and time to sit back and play big, think big. And especially now in these times, in these COVID times, we are in such crisis that it's so easy to shrink in on ourselves. And instead, I think the key thing is to go and think, how do we think beyond the confines of our crisis? How do we make the best and imagine a world that could be completely different? So I'm going to take a pause, and I just want to check and see if there are any questions that are here. So far, so good. I love this go big or go home from Michael. That's wonderful. And also some people who are talking about how difficult this is to think about it. So let's go a little bit further into this. One of the reasons why I think it's so important to put it in the present tense is that if you think about it as something in the future and not an actual thing that you can imagine, it becomes very hard to imagine what that would look like, to put it down in writing. And this is a practice that I love that Amazon has. They have something called the press release from the future. And it's literally a press release that they write that if this proposed initiative goes through and it is successful, what is the press release? What is the cover story going to read like on the front page of the Wall Street Journal? And when you can write that in great detail, like this is what we announced, this is what the impact, this is what the customers are saying, this is how the world is going to be different, analysts chiming in thinking and saying this is the best thing since sliced bread because of these reasons, you put all those things down. And it makes you think about that world as a reality. And when you can really look at that, refine it, you can hold it up, look at it, show it to other people, then you can get the feedback, the critiques, the people giving you, well, maybe this is a different way to think about that future. Or more importantly, how are you going to get there? What's the path? Because the next step after writing it down, sharing it, putting it into that present tense, is to put together that action plan. What are you going to do to make this happen? And instead of feeling like you have to have every single step figured out, it's much more about thinking about the next, first, best step that you can take. Something that is going to energize you, that you're excited about doing, something that you can sustain for a week or so. We're talking really small. But very importantly, there's going to be an outcome at the end of that sprint, that 1 or 2 week sprint, something tangible that you can show to somebody. Ideally, that you can show to a potential customer, somebody who's going to be impacted by this, and get their feedback. That feedback is important because it takes you out of that dreamland and into the reality land where you're actually playing. You're actually taking action and not just dreaming. Because otherwise, it's just going to stay on the whiteboard. It's just going to stay in the idea phase, and you'll never make progress on it. And I think the last thing to think about is to prepare for the setbacks. Inevitably, there are going to be setbacks because you're playing big. You're doing big things, and big things don't happen easily. Easy, it means that it's going to get done. It's the hard stuff. It's the audacious stuff that's really difficult to accomplish. And you have to be prepared to know that this is going to be really hard. So what I love to talk about now are some of the barriers you're going to have to overcome. The first one that I hear from a lot of people that keep them from thinking big is what I call the precursors. They say, well, I've got to do this thing first and then that thing. I need to get my MBA. I need to go start a company and then work in VCs to truly understand how startups begin. And then I can start my company. And having started a company, that's not the way it works. And you talk to every entrepreneur, they were far from qualified from being able to start their company. And they will all admit to the fact that they made horrendous mistakes along the way. We all did. So why put these barriers in front of you, these precursors, this sort of criteria that says, I'm not ready. I'm not ready until I have done this. If you keep doing that, you'll never get to play big because it says in order to play big, I need to have permission. I need to have some credentials, something that somebody else has determined that I need to have, or I have listened to my inner judge and said, I can't do this for whatever reason. Flipping it on its head, by saying the vision that you have, the ability to have this big idea of what you want to accomplish should be so compelling that you want to begin working on it as soon as you can. So I don't think you should be thinking about all the reasons to say no to yourself before getting started. Let somebody else say no, but don't say no to yourself. Don't put these artificial barriers to you going forward. I think I've shared this in previous lives, but I was talking to a woman who said, I want to start a company, but I got to take care of a few personal things. And I thought maybe it was like taking care of her grandmother or like health issues or she had to move or something. And it turned out, no, she felt like she needed to take some courses, needed to go and work in certain companies to get that startup experience. And I said, no, this is your time. If you have an idea of what you want to start. I'm not saying go quit your job, but take that action for a week and start building your dream. Start building this thing that you want to do. Start playing and living big. So the first barrier to overcome, I think, is to get rid of all these precursors. Really understand what's your precursor that you have to have. The only one I would say is have enough cash in the bank so that if you're so excited about something, you want to do it, you have enough living expenses for a while. You have a way to make that money so that you don't have to worry and make bad choices because of living cash expenses. The second thing I would say is analysis paralysis. So you're moving along, you're creating these great ideas, but it's just not perfect yet. It's not ready for prime time. I need to put more detail against it, or I need better numbers, or this graphic just doesn't look right. It's not ready for prime time. And that will kill any great idea, no matter how big or how small. I think one of the biggest beliefs and behaviors of disruptive leaders and organizations is a bias for action. They practice what I call minimally viable data. They get the minimal amount of information that they need to make a decision, decide, and then go forward. And this is so important because if you want to play big, the market is moving away from you faster than you can chase after it. So time is your enemy. You've got to go fast and understand what works and what doesn't. The best way to see if something works isn't to do more analysis, is to actually put it in the market and see if people want it. And that's how you do your research. That's how you prepare and plan. So do not fall and become a victim to analysis paralysis. All right, I just want to see if there were any other questions as we go along here. I'm not seeing many, but if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. And I'll also go back into the feed for people who are watching this replay later on. And I'll just be checking the messages. If you have any questions, would love to engage with you and hear what you have to say. I think the last area is a fear of criticism. Again, this is your baby. This is your beautiful, precious thing. And a lot of people say, well, I want to make it big, but I really don't like to hear people telling me this doesn't work, or they don't want to confront people. So they kind of hide it away and not show it to anybody. And you will not get to that point where it becomes bigger and better and grows without that collaboration from people. Because I don't care how brilliant you are, unless you make this a team effort, unless you're bringing people in to help and collaborate and to create a movement around this idea, it's never going to get big. If it's only you pushing it forward, it will always remain small. And so open up things. This is another thing that I've seen disruptive organizations and leaders do, is they're very open, very transparent. They build in the structures so that people can give lots of feedback. So there's no place to hide. There's tremendous transparency and accountability. But that has to begin with you, and be able to say, okay, here is my idea, and be open and vulnerable to people saying, maybe not such a great idea. And then ask for the feedback to say, well, how can I make it better? It's an interesting mix of having humility to know that you don't have all the answers, but also the confidence to be able to ask for that help. These two combinations, I think, these two traits of humility and confidence are the distinctions of what I think are really good disruptive leaders who are able to play big. So I think that the thing that I would love to close out on is that if you want to play big, there's no better time to do that than right now. And not only because there's a lot of new opportunities coming up, but also because the need for people like you to play big is so high. We have so many challenges facing our world today, facing yourself, your family, your neighborhood, your community, your organization, society in general. And this is the time to play big because we need everybody, all hands on deck to make this world work, to help this world to heal. So there are a couple of things I would like to just point out. I have been doing these live sessions quite a bit, and I want to be able to also just make other resources available so you can go back and look at some of those. I also have a manifesto writing workshop coming up. It'll be Thursday, May 7th. And the idea here is it's a workshop. So it's a Zoom meeting. You have to limit it to 100 people so that it can be more interactive. But it's an opportunity to really sit down and write out a manifesto. And the reason why a manifesto is so important is that it helps you really focus on what you're trying to accomplish. What is this big idea? What is your purpose? And instead of a single sentence or some abstract long document or a PowerPoint, a manifesto is a call to arms. It's a call to arms for yourself and for the people who are going to follow you as a leader to say, this is the world that we see it, why it's broken, and how we want to fix it and make it better. And I ran this earlier this year for a small group of people, and the response was so strong. They've been begging me to do it again. I figured this is a good time to be doing that. So I'm just going to do a last check to see if there are any questions. There are a couple here. This is great. So how do you know, from James, he's asking, how do you know when you have a minimally viable data to make a decision? What a great question. Usually when you have a couple options in front of you, you're saying, okay, these are the unknowns, but there's usually a couple data points, a couple triggers, I call them triggers, that say, once I know that trigger is true, that'll help me make a decision between option A and option B. And that is by far the biggest trigger that if I know what that is, then I have pretty good confidence that more likely than not, this is the right answer. And then you go for it. Here's the problem that people have with this. Because you're not 100% sure that this is the right answer, they won't go there. But here's the secret. Most decisions are reversible. You can always go back and you figure out as you're developing option A and people hate it, didn't turn out the way you wanted to, back it up. Back it up. Look at the data again and say, well, maybe option B was the better thing. We now have a little bit more time, more data, or maybe it's an option C. So this is, I think, minimally viable data says, as soon as I have just barely enough information to choose between various options, I'm going to choose and take it to the market and figure out what works or not. Let's see, what's another one here? Some people are doing a great job summarizing, which is great. And I think just this whole idea of vulnerability is a thing that, again, I feel oftentimes like I'm channeling Brene Brown, who is a wonderful person speaking and opening us up to this idea of being vulnerable. But one thing I have learned as an entrepreneur and as a leader is that people really respond to that because they're not looking to you to have all the answers. And for you to admit, I don't have all the answers, but I know this is the direction we want to head in. This is our purpose, and we're going to align each other and rely on each other to be aligned around that purpose of what we're trying to achieve. And if you can ask the right questions, I find, not necessarily have all the answers, you will be successful as a leader. Because the thing that people want more from their leaders, this is from the survey work that I've done, the number one attribute that people want from their leaders is honesty. They want to be told when things are going well. They also want to be told the truth when things are not going well so that they can deal with it, so that they can take action. They don't want to be left in the dark. They don't want to be told untruths. So this is how you develop trust, and this is how you actually come together. The last thing I'm going to mention is there is, I put it on here in the area too as well, and that is a new network that I'm creating, a new community called Quantum Networks. You can find it at quantum-networks.com. It is a community for disruptors, for people who want to grow in their leadership capacity to create disruption, create exponential change. So I invite you to come and check it out, join the community. I'll be the first one to say, this was my inspiration for playing big. I'll close out by just showing what my actual inspiration for this. I received this little bracelet, and I'm going to hold it up to the camera so you can see it. But it says "Play Big." I received this at a conference, and I picked it up out of a choice of many different other ones, and I wear this when I'm about to go off and do something big and crazy. And Quantum Networks is definitely one of them. I just knew that there was this need, this desire to create a place where disruptors could come, because oftentimes we're alone by ourselves, trying to do some crazy thing in our organization, in our lives, in our societies. And we need places, a safe place where we can be vulnerable, seek each other's counsel, and be able to play big. And so this is my play big moment for that. I don't know all the answers. It's messy. I'm trying to figure out as we go along what this community looks like, what it means, how we will build a community together. But I invite you to come in and join the journey. There are a lot of really cool, interesting people. Many of them are on this live program here. But I encourage you to come and check it out, help build the community, and hopefully it can help you in your disruption dreams to play big. So I'm going to sign off right now. Again, my name is Charlene Lee. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you coming and checking this out, and all of your comments too as well. Thank you and have a great day. Bye-bye.